One question that I get quite a bit with systems that I've quoted or just people asking me about solar is how does solar actually pay for itself? And it's not as complicated as people think. So, what we're going to do today is show you how the solar payback works with a real world example. So, the setup we're going to be looking at is a 16 panel system with two batteries, and yeah, the three simple ways that it generates your income and pays for itself over like an average of 5 to 7 years. So the three ways that solar pays for itself, we've got cutting down electricity bills, getting paid for the energy you don't use, and then charging cheap at night so you avoid buying expensive power in the day, mostly applicable to winter. So we'll hop into what each of those mean. But first, let's take a quicker look at our example system that we have pulled together. So here's the system that we're using, for example. Pretty standard system, especially if you've been well, if you're a solar installer yourself, you know this is pretty much like the very basic system that you can get. So it's 16 panels, which gives us about 7.5 kilowatts. We've done two batteries on there, giving around 17 kilowatt hours of usable storage. So this system would generate about 6,000 kilowatt hours in a year. And of that, we're assuming that it's going to be used in 66%, whether that's using the solar directly as it's generated or capturing some of that solar energy to use in the battery to use in the evening or overnight or on cloudier periods, which means the other third's going to be getting exported. And then the tariffs that we're currently using like average market rates. So we've got 24p a kilowatt import, 8p a kilowatt night rate, and then 15p a kilowatt on the export. And this system would usually cost around £12,000 with an estimated payback of 5 to 7 years, which can vary a lot. The payback can vary a lot depending, obviously, on how many roofs you're going on, any scaffolding issues, how many batteries, what your usage is like, self-consumption. There's so many factors that go into payback, which we make sure to look at on an individual basis every single time instead of providing just cookie cutter installations. So let's hop into the first one. First way that the solar is going to be saving you money is through bill displacement. This is the single biggest driver of solar savings. So the best way to think of it is every unit your home uses from the solar, whether that's directly as it's generated or stored in the battery for later use, is one less unit that you're having to buy from the grid at that 24p that we previously mentioned. So with this system, we're saying there's going to be the property is going to be self-consuming around 4,000 kilowatt hours, which if you multiply that 4,000 kilowatt hours by 24p, we're looking at just shy of £1,000 savings in the first year. This is where a majority of the grid independence comes from, being able to generate the electricity from your roof. And the second payback method that we're looking at is export payment. So as I mentioned it when we were running through the example, you're going to be with this example system, we're based on exporting a third of the energy. Some people ask, oh, what happens to that energy? Is it just going to waste? But that's where SEG comes into place. And what SEG is Smart Export Guarantee. And it means your supplier is going to be paying you for what you don't use / what you're sending back to the grid. And at the moment, that's around 15p a kilowatt, which is a huge step up from where we previously were at 5p. So if we look at the figures for that, we've got an estimated export of 2,000 kilowatt hours, times that by our 15p, which adds up to about £300 extra income each year just from sending the energy back. So if we're looking at our running total, we're just shy of 1,300 now. And that leads us on to our third method of payback from the solar and battery setup, which is battery arbitrage, which might sound fancy, but it's actually really simple. So battery arbitrage means charging the battery overnight on a cheap tariff, usually around 8p a kilowatt, and then using that stored energy during the day when your system when importing energy would usually be costing you around 24p a kilowatt. So a good way to think of it is it's almost like buying electricity on sale at night and then cashing it in when it's expensive. So in our example, we're based on filling the rest of the property's usage via the battery, and that would be potentially some, well, full cycles over the winter where the usage is going to be higher and the solar generation is lower, but then also supplementing that with, say, half cycles in spring and autumn where you're kind of using a nice balance between the solar and battery to cover as much of your usage as possible. And as you can see here, well, we've got 16p there, but if we're basing it on 15p, it would be closer to the 300 mark for the first year of savings, which brings us to a very nice just shy of 1600 for the first year of savings. So you can really start to see where the payback comes from with solar and battery setups. And you'll have this payback sheet in your proposal, or if you haven't had a proposal from us yet, we'll be able to get you this financial breakdown together. So when we add all of these payback metrics together, we get your forecasted savings over the year. And it's not just guesswork, we jump into your current usage, your location, and also your future plans, say if you're adding electric vehicle or adding heat pump, we make sure to account that into our designs and how your usage is going to adapt over time. Then alongside that, we also calculate your system's generation using 20 years of historic weather data for your exact location, which way your roof is facing, and then also the pitch of the roof. That way, the forecast isn't based on one unusually sunny year, it's averaged out across 2 decades, so you get a realistic picture of annual performance. There's then a few other factors that we need to make sure that we apply into the payback. One of those is electricity price inflation. Unfortunately, it keeps going up. So what we do is we use the long-term UK trend. So over the last 20 years, the electricity price has gone from about 8.4p a unit in 2005 to nearly 25p today, which is about a 200% increase, averages out to about 5.5% a year. In our model, we only use 4% annual inflation, which is deliberately conservative compared to that trend to make sure that we give you the most realistic idea of payback possible. Even if you drop that figure to about 2%, for example, you're only really looking at it adding around 1 year onto the payback, which in the grand scheme of things, when we're looking at a system that's going to be generating you revenue over 20, 30 years, 1 year isn't that bad. We also then make sure to factor in panel degradation, as their generation does drop year on year, but only by a small percentage, 0.5% per year, and then the battery degradation as well at 1.5% a year. So performance does slowly taper off, but even at the end of those, say, 20 years, you still have a system that's going to be massively reducing your grid dependence. And that's why you can have confidence in the figures. They're grounded in long-term weather data, price data, and they're modeled really conservatively with degradation already included in there for you. So to recap, solar pays for itself in 3 ways. We've got bill displacement, which is cutting your bills with self-consumed energy. That's the biggest driver of your payback. Alongside that, you've got export payments, the SEG, earning you income from exporting excess energy back to the grid. And then last but not least, we've got battery arbitrage, which is helping you buy cheap and using it when it's expensive through stored battery energy. So when we add those all together, for our example, we're looking between 1,500 to 1,600 in year 1. And then when we look over a longer time scale of 20 years with all of those inflation and degradation factors built in, we're looking at just shy of £30,000. Alongside the financial benefits, you will also have the energy security. The if prices are to shoot up to say 30p, 35p, 40p, you know that a decent chunk of your bills are already going to be covered by the solar that you're generating, so you don't end up paying those massive rate hikes. So if it helps, I'll be happy to run through your proposal again, run through the financial figures, even run through a few different scenarios. And if you haven't already had a proposal, we'll be happy to draw up a design, draw up the financial breakdowns for you and see if it works for you. Thank you.